Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
When a kid comes out, it's a 15% chance that they'll try to kill themselves. If they're rejected on religious grounds by their family, that doubles. Why don't we set the bar at only sharing beliefs that don't make them want to kill themselves? Right? It's a low bar, but
it seems so great.
I feel like we can clear it.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan.
And I'm Dan Beecher.
And you're listening to the Data Over Dogma podcast, where we increase public access to the academic study of the Bible and religion, and we combat the spread of misinformation about the same. And you may not be able to hear it, but those of you watching this on YouTube will see that we're in a slightly different setting.
Yeah, this is a whole new configuration for us.
Yeah.
We are all in the same room. We are here. You and I, Dan, are here together, and we have a special guest. Would you like to introduce our guest?
Our guest is Jeremy, and I suppose I should have asked you at some point about your last name, but
Steele.
No, I knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm the worst with names. But Jeremy is on social media, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram as well, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. As the thing that sticks in my head about your introduction of yourself in each video is that you are a deep skeptic.
Yeah.
And a pastor.
Right.
And I would like to hear more about what deep skeptic means to you, and then introduce yourself a little more thoroughly for the kids.
Yeah, for sure. Deep skeptic. So there's some people that are like skeptical. You're just like, I don't know about that, right? For me, what it means when I say I'm a deep skeptic is that I just am not going to accept something until I have some solid data. And if I don't have solid data, we'll leave it open, right? And I think when I say deep skeptic, I also mean that I'm never going to close down really anything I believe. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. It's 100%. It's the law, whatever. I'm always open to new data. And now the more data I amass about something, the less likely it is that I'm going to sort of let go of that.
And specifically, we're talking about skeptical even of things like the question of whether or not there's a God, or
for sure,
any of those which is not the most traditional position for a pastor to take.
You're not wrong. And people regularly remind me of that online.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Because I think the question about the existence of God, it's a hard thing to, any data, anything you get is just completely subjective.
Yeah.
Very circumstantial. And so there are days when I'm yeah, I think God exists, but it's all experiential. It's you experience a sense of transcendence or whatever it is that people sort of want to tag to God or the universe or whatever they call it. but it always boils down to experience, right? You can't measure that
yet.
So I go back and forth. So, and that's, I think, for me, there's this really great book by a researcher named Dr. Lisa Miller. She's Columbia, and I think she worked with Yale or Princeton. All the Ivy League schools are the same in my head. But
she's fancy.
She's real fancy and super smart. And basically they were studying religious beliefs, religious practices, and religious experience. And at the end of the day, it didn't really matter which religion that they were studying. They all had an overall positive effect on people's mental health, well-being, and all sorts of metrics for like a good life. Yeah. So like they had an easier ability to cope with stress, a more sense of connection. And the other thing that was really interesting is, like, statistically, deep religious experiences, and not the ones that people are traumatized and ruined by, but like deep religious experiences had represented a statistically significant protective effect against recurring of major depressive disorder. And when they were, doing the fMRI scans, and people were talking about like reliving the religious belief moments, the same part of the brain that is stimulated by an SSRI was the one that was lighting up on the fMRI. So I say all that to say, because of course, being a pastor, I consider that role, at least for me, to be helping people find spiritual beliefs and practices that work for them, that help them become the best version of themselves, find a purpose greater than themselves, and maybe experience transcendence.
Without necessarily tying it to a specific tradition.
Right.
But making it more about the experience without the boundaries of a given community or faith tradition. Right.
And that's partially because of the population I work with too.
Talk a little about that.
Yeah. But I should say, at the end of the day, if I die, God doesn't exist. I feel like I've spent my life on something that has actually helped people, even if it turned out the whole enterprise of religion was a lie. So that's how I make peace with the who knows about God, but the religious stuff might help people. Yeah, but the community that I work with, it sort of grows out of my TikTok and other social media platforms. It's people that have been deeply hurt and traumatized by religion, but are wanting to be a spiritual person, have spiritual beliefs and practices. And so almost all of them, the religious stream that traumatized them was Christianity. And so I like to say I'm a practitioner of Christianity. That's what I'm trained in. I don't like to call myself a Christian, but and so
can you sort of can we dig into that a little bit? The distinction that you're making there?
Yeah, I live in DC, okay, and
enough said.
I'm not sure that is enough.
Right. I'm also part of the queer community, and when you say Christian, it means something. In both of those spaces.
Something more than just I'm a believer in Jesus or I follow a certain set of tenets. It has a greater sort of sociological meaning.
Yeah. And what it means does not describe me.
Right.
Right.
It almost rejects you.
It is. I am in many ways the opposite of the kind of contemporary cultural definition that it comes up in people's mind when you say Christian, especially when it's somebody that's not involved in Christianity. And so that's not me. But as far as a religious tradition, in my experience, that's what I know the most. That's what I went to graduate school to study. And so I practice that. But man, I don't want you to think of me as part of the community with all of those people
You don't feel in community with Mike Johnson and
Definitely not. Yeah. In fact, like, oh my God, when he talked about having a biblical worldview and like, if you want to know what he thinks, read the Bible. I'm like, have you read the Bible? Like,
no, he is not.
So like, you're really good with like, you know, just enough beating of a slave. Right. Just the right amount.
The correct amount of beating. You don't want to go past.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I wish I had something that didn't use the word Christian, really. But all the like stuff, I grew up in the evangelical deep South in the 80s and 90s, and like follower of Christ or Christ, all of it seems like cheesy and not it. That's the best thing I've come up with. I've asked people on TikTok to help me out. Nobody's got something that feels like it resonates more with me.
You put the ish in Christian. Almost got him on a spit take on that one.
Yeah.
Almost got the spit take.
It's like who was the politician, George Santos, that like he said his parents were Jewish and somebody confronted him and he's like they're not Jewish. And he's like, I meant Jew-ish.
Yeah. Classic.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
So talk to us about, because you are an ordained pastor.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your path from presumably very conservative Christianity in the South to a, queer positive pastor in DC. Like what did that road look like?
Man. It's interesting because like when I say I'm a deep skeptic, like I've always been that, but I'm also old. And so when I grew up in that sort of evangelical, deep South, conservative religious culture, you only have access to the information that is around you or in the it was a smaller town. It was this tiny library that is the books that are selected by the people in that town. And so, when I asked about like evolution and science, the people who had graduate degrees that were in my life were creation scientists like that.
Wow.
Bullshit. Are we allowed to cuss on this podcast?
You are.
Okay, cool. And so like the pseudoscience stuff. And so like I would receive this stuff and I would read it and I would, believe it until I, got a little bit further along and there were some people that would push back against it. Right. And so that it took a long time really to start to unwind a lot of that because I had all of this data that I've been given from what I was told was reputable sources. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, right? And the other thing, growing up as somebody who's not straight in that culture is that it really wasn't an option to claim an identity other than straight, cisgender, all of that.
Right.
Anything outside of that norm was a temptation, was something you were struggling with. And that gets deep, right? I'll never forget. This is when I was in high school, there was this woman, we'll call her Pam.
Okay. That sounds right.
Mm-hmm. And Miss Pam had a prayer gathering at her house for her high school students. And, but it was very charismatic, right? It was probably the gayest thing I have ever been a part of because we would come in, she would put on vineyard music and we would have tambourines and streamers. We would dance around and people would fall out and speak in tongues. And there was this guy there that was there every week like me, like every time. And then all of a sudden he wasn't there for a couple of weeks. And I asked Miss Pam, I said, Miss Pam, what happened to John? And she like looked around, like, did anybody hear him ask that? Pulls me into the kitchen. And she was like, well, a couple of weeks ago, John confessed to me that he was struggling with homosexuality. So, and then she left.
So,
and I was like, so like the like evangelical CIA came and got him. like it's not clear. What was clear though is that was something that was so bad that it meant that you couldn't be part of the community anymore.
right.
And either you had to be that
your client's confidentiality either,
right?
Just sharing this with.
Come on, Pam.
I know.
Don't just go sharing that.
And that either you had to, you should be so ashamed that you should never show your face again, or that you were not welcome. And I had been in the church world enough to know that both of those things.
He didn't say I am a practicing homosexual. He said I'm struggling with this,
Right.
and that in and of itself,
Yeah.
she considered to be sinful, or she
Yeah.
considered.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because she said, so like
She
I
just
was
trailed off
supposed to
and-
know. And as a high schooler, like I made up all of this stuff.
So we murdered him.
Right. So you will never see him again. And I did never see him again. We went to different schools. And,
okay.
and so, but that kind of messaging, and it's not just the like actual homophobic rhetoric. It's the way it's enforced, the way it's, you internalize that,
Yeah.
right? This internalized homophobia. And you go years and decades with this idea that like, oh, wow, this is a problem that I like, oh, if I stare at somebody of the same gender, I've got to stop and I've got to stare at somebody of a different gender for the same amount of time to like, because then I'm
in
fine.
case somebody caught you, and then they can be like, "Oh, okay." It turns out
no, no.
Because a
they're
negative
actually-
plus a positive
Right,
cancel each
exactly.
other out.
Yeah. And so even long after years after I had sort of made this transition, and what really helped me make theological transition was going to a seminary that was really a kind of Wesleyan evangelical seminary. They gave me the tools to like, the real tools to study stuff. And I was like, oh, everything you've been saying so far is bullshit? Cool. But even after I had made that transition in my theology and all of that, I still had this internalized, and it took therapy and all kinds of things for me to come to grips with who I was and go through that sort of internal process. And that was probably the final piece, right? Was to be able to say to myself the things that I've been saying to other people for years and years.
I guess part of my question is, when you are, when you've been part of a community that has associated itself so strongly with this is the Christian position.
Right.
And you've been rejected, or at least a part of you that's sort of integral to who you are, has been so roundly rejected by that in the name of this Christianity.
Right.
What did it feel like to then pursue pastorhood, or to pursue, to go to seminary with that hanging over it, everything?
And see, this is the interesting thing. Like that internalized homophobia and evangelical dogmatism, you don't, until you do, you just feel like, I don't know, my friend has the sin of gossip and they're dealing with that. Mm-hmm. I have this other sin and I'm dealing with that. And it's not like your identity is being rejected.
Okay.
Right? It's that like, oh, I have this thing, this problem. And like, and as now, when it starts to break open, then you are feeling that. But for me, that was after seminary.
Okay.
And, and I had I went to some camp where in the Deep South, where when I was a teenager, lots of manipulation, lots of like, altar call stuff, and decided when I was in the 6th grade, I was going to be a pastor and like never let go of that. And so it was a foregone conclusion at some point that I was going to go to seminary and do the thing.
Well, and I'm sure you got like a lot of positive feedback.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You say, I'm going to be a pastor, and everybody's like, oh, yay.
Right.
Jeremy's going to turn out great.
Right.
We're going to be so proud.
And now they all think I'm going to hell.
Yeah. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Listen, Factor has great chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. I know that there have been several times when I have caught myself unawares. I'm about to go and record this show, and suddenly I realize, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten anything, and I don't want to spend all this time doing a recording and not having eaten. So it is fabulous to have ready to heat and eat meals. It's 2 minutes, and I'm suddenly eating a delicious meal that has never been frozen. It's fresh food. It's delicious.
It is fresh and fully prepared. It's perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. I love it. You throw it in the microwave for a couple of minutes. They've got 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu every week. You can pick meals that are tailored to your goals. You can do Calorie Smart. You can do Keto. You can do Protein Plus. I did the Protein Plus last time around, and there was one meal in there. I enjoyed all of them, but there was one that really stuck out to me. It was like a chicken, bacon, and ranch thing.
Oh, that
with
sounds great.
Some Brussels sprouts. And normally I'm not a huge fan of Brussels sprouts, but these were phenomenal. So it always surprises me how much I actually enjoy these foods. They're a lot richer and a lot more satisfying than a lot of the pre-made meal options that are out there.
Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
I don't know about you, Dan, but I like keeping my money where I can seize it.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, traditional big wireless carriers always seem to like keeping my money too. And after years of overpaying for wireless, we are starting to get fed up from crazy high wireless bills, bogus fees, and quote-unquote free perks that actually cost more in the long run. And we've switched, at least for now, for my girls. They both have Mint Mobile plans that do not run them much at all, and most helpful of all, don't cause us any additional stress. It's been very easy, very simple, and we have been grateful for it.
Yeah, I don't know how it could be any easier. All their plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Comes in with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. You use your own phone, you bring your old phone number along with you, all your existing contacts. You can just ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month.
If you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/dogma. That's mintmobile.com/dogma. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5 GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Well, and I think your story raises something interesting. A lot of folks, like I don't compute for a lot of folks, particularly people who have grown up Christian. And you pointed to something that is central to the perseverance of Christian traditions, is that when someone is raised within that framework, and that is the foundation of their identity, and that is, the lens through which they know and experience and see the world throughout their entire childhood, and it's all they know, that's not something that you can just flip a switch and it goes away. Like, even if you decide, okay, this is me, I'm not changing, I'm not going to feel bad about this anymore.
Right.
That's your worldview is still structured upon that. And so it influences you for the rest of your life.
And I think that is what leads a lot of people to look at me and be like, well, he's just lying about something, because there's no way on earth that this all computes. But I came into religion as an adult, as a 20-year-old, and brought my rather secular upbringing, because I grew up in Gaithersburg.
Oh, wow.
I went to Travilla Elementary School, which is, we took field trips down to, over to Antietam, down to the mall, and to all the museums and everything, and to the Potomac River that I thought was the Potomac for the longest time. But like I was raised
definitely
to believe,
a Southern pronunciation of that word, the Potomac.
I think the first time I saw it was like in elementary school, and there was like a worksheet, and we were learning about indigenous peoples, and it was like the Potomac tribe. I was like, oh, okay,
right.
that makes sense. I didn't recognize this as the name of the river that was down the street.
Right.
I was like, the Potomac tribe. That sounds very indigenous.
Yes.
But I was raised to believe in evolution and raised to believe in all this stuff, and my education was very different. And I brought all that with me into the church. And what I've told people is, no one ever tried to disabuse me of any of that. As an adult who could present as fairly well informed and fairly intelligent, I guess, I don't know, they just didn't think it was worth it, or maybe they were intimidated by the prospect of trying to get me to like return cognitively to primary school so that I could be indoctrinated and conditioned to believe all these things. And so I think that for a lot of people who are raised like that, once you have those primary answers, is what we say within the LDS tradition, kind of installed in your cognitive foundations and the foundation of your worldview, it's hard to let them go. Yeah. And so usually the perspectives in adulthood are not very far from those foundations that were built, which is why I think a lot of apologists who go to seminary or something like that, because they want to defend the faith, they end up still, the apple does not roll far away from the tree, and they end up defending a lot of very simplistic, very juvenile perspectives about what faith can be, what a religious identity is, and what sin and all that kind of stuff is as well.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, really the core piece of me was like always questioning, right? And, finding things that like didn't seem right, and then asking the questions, getting answers. And eventually those answers, the more developed my brain became, the less satisfying those answers were. Yeah. And then the further I got in school, the more I was like, no, science, I really believe this. This is testable. This is repeatable. Right. And there was this limbo phase with figuring out like, what does that mean about the Bible and all that kind of stuff? But for me, like, and this is for good or for bad, when I don't have an answer, I'm just like, it'll come at some point. I'll just leave that, and I'll just watch some Dan McClellan videos at some point. And answer it.
I've found a phrase that I started using in graduate school that I love is suspend judgment.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, we can't really know for sure. I'm just going to suspend judgment and move along with my life. I don't have to resolve this right now, particularly when it's something that no one has ever been able to resolve.
Well, it's such an important thing that we don't always get in society. We don't always get taught that, like saying I don't know.
Yes.
Is such a positive, like strong position to take. Yeah. Whereas, I think there's this sense that there's a weakness in I don't know, or that there's somehow a shame in I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of a lot of the Christian worldview is that the answers are all out there, and that they're all there for the taking, and that everything does have an answer. If you're proclaiming objective, absolute truth, and people are like, well, tell me about this moral quandary. And they're like, well, now I've committed to having an answer, so I need to have one.
Yeah. Over, towards the end of the December, near the solstice, I did a couple of like darkest night moments on TikTok Live, and where I just said, like, just name what's hard. Like, the holidays are not always happy, and in fact, the like pressure to feel and act happy can make the sadness worse. And so, it was intense. I'll be honest. Like, it was thousands of people, and they're just like, it was scrolling by faster than I could then I could answer them. But there was a couple of times where somebody would say like, I lost both my kids in a car wreck, earlier this year. And how could God do that to me? And, all this kind of stuff. And like, how could God be loving and all of that? And like, I remember saying like, I have no idea, but that is horrible. It shouldn't happen. And the like feeling that you have that there's something fundamentally flawed about the universe because that kind of stuff can happen. I think that's right. And I can just be there with you and hold space for it. And it was interesting. I literally had like, there's no answer to that. Yeah. And when the couple of times that happened, the like, I don't know answer, people were like, oh shit. That's what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for an answer.
I think that it becomes almost problematic.
Yeah.
When people, I've been to funerals where because of the religious construct of the funeral, people weren't allowed to mourn.
Yeah.
It was seen as a failure of faith to mourn the passing of a person who was supposedly now in a better place. So why would you mourn that? And it doesn't acknowledge the human moment that's happening.
Yeah.
I think it's something that, how many wives have had to try to help their husbands understand that they don't need to be fixed. They just need somebody to cry with them or to be there for them.
Yeah.
And so that's why...
To commit the sin of empathy.
Yes. One of the eighth deadly sin. That scene was cut out of 7. And they had to change the title of the film, which cost them a lot of money with legal. But anyway, and there's an explanation for this, because an awful lot of Christianity is built on having right belief. That's what orthodoxy is. And so there's also this presupposition that turns out to be entirely wrong. We can test it and show that behavior does not flow directly downstream from belief. But that is a very, very common connection that is made. And so, and this actually has like evolutionary, pretty deep roots, that if you're a part of a community, communities have certain standards, certain beliefs, certain mores, and these exist so that you can put on display your fidelity to the group's standards to others.
Right.
So we live in communities that are large enough that pretty much everybody can expect to run into people on a fairly regular basis that they don't know and have to even rely on them for whatever they need to get done. And you need mechanisms to be able to know, I can trust this person or I can't trust this person. I need to have a duel with this person, whatever. And religion, what we label religion, is a very efficient and effective means of doing that with a lot of the rituals and things that we do. But this results in a lot of beliefs becoming costly signaling. So if you to go to a funeral and say, I'm not sad, I'm happy because they're in a better place. That is a way, and deep down, like that's an inevitable human reaction. You can't avoid that, but that you hide it, you incur that cost by performing that faith because that shows everybody else.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I believe it. I believe what we're supposed to believe, and because if we believe what we're supposed to believe, we will behave a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm willing to behave that way, and they're hard to fake signals of sincere belief in the group's standards. And that kind of stuff's been tested for decades. And
I had this conversation with a rabbi, and you're going to tell me it's wrong probably, and it's going to ruin everything. But he told me about the point in the Exodus story where Moses comes down, gathers everybody, reads the law, and then they respond. And he said that there's this like construction there of the response that says in Hebrew it says like in an English translation of like we will do what God has commanded us or whatever, but in the Hebrew it says, and this is where you're going to tell me I'm wrong, but it's fine, that they say all that the Lord has said we will do and we will hear, or we will do and we will understand. It's like do and hear, right?
Okay.
And And
you're safe because Dan doesn't have any way of looking.
You're reaching for your phone
in the Hebrew, because normally it's hear and do. It's the other way around,
right? But in the order of the words, and this is what he said, and so we'll see. So he said that it's actually revealing something about how we experience belief, that we don't understand and then do, but it's in the doing that we like form our beliefs in community, and that there's obviously an interplay between what we learn and what we do, but and that, even if you tell me it's a lie, that has really formed a lot of what the way I process things. And also I'm I'm from this Wesleyan tradition where we have experience as part of this sort of belief formation process that they say was Wesley, but it was just totally made up by a scholar, which is fine. But yeah, that whole idea of it's in the doing that we believe. That feels right to me with my experience of the world.
And even in the LDS tradition, you have something very similar, that a testimony is developed in the bearing of it.
Interesting.
And so, and I think there are two sides to this, because on one, the kind of cynical side of me would say this is just a rationalization of people not being able to deny that you actually are performing this.
Right.
And they're saying, okay, well, yeah, we'll say that you're performing it, but that's how you develop. Like the cynical side of me would be that's just a rationalization. But at the same time, I think there is truth to that, because the performance is what develops the community. And so while there is a degree of performativeness, I think, to that kind of thing, if that is generating community, and if that is generating connections and meaning and value and all that kind of thing, then I think there is truth to the fact that the community is developed and their faith is increased, and there's this collective effervescence, to quote an outdated scholar, that makes it all meaningful and makes it all worth it. And so from an experiential point of view, I think there's value to that, absolutely. So yeah,
I really after we stop recording, I've got to know. I need you to look up
the passage.
Look up the passage,
yeah, because normally it is hear and do.
Right? No, for sure.
Here.
Maybe we'll do that in the patrons
after
only
party.
Patrons only, definitely.
We'll give our patrons something to look forward to.
And usually also shama is the verb for hear, but it's not used to just mean passively hear. Right. It means hearken. Something like hearken. It's more like we will absorb this and we will agree with it and that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I wanted to get to just talking about whom you're ministering to.
Okay.
And what and because you've mentioned that it is not a standard flock that you are a shepherd of. Yeah. Talk about like how it has come about, and then and who they tend to be, and why they've come to you.
Why they've come to me, who the hell knows? But
this is beyond all content creators with large audiences. When people come and say, "What is the secret?" Nobody knows.
I don't know. I put shit out there and people watch it, and at some point I feel like they'll stop, but they haven't. So I was writing a marketing article and trying to tell nonprofits how to use TikTok. I was researching how to use TikTok, and I decided I was going to put out some content that was authentic to who I am, which is a pastor who is not sure if God exists, which is funny because I've said that in all the places I've ever worked, and they didn't ever fire me. I just got set up on blind date with atheist nephews to talk to them. So I did that, and I exposed corruption in the church, which is like, I think, an important piece, because to have a pastor name these things as like wrong and they shouldn't have happened, and where I was part of it earlier to confess that like, yeah, I did that and I can't believe it, and I suck as a Christian. So that's an important piece for people to I don't know, see a person in this role say that.
Well, sadly, it's not what we're used to, right?
Yeah.
What we're used to is hearing about corruption or some sort of sexual misconduct or whatever,
Right.
and how the church and the people surrounding it and like the higher ups covered it up and how they shuffled it away. So like to hear someone who is in the clergy willing to actually call it out as the horrible thing that it is and to decry it
Right.
is unfortunately a little bit rare.
Yeah, and it's a thing that that my experience is that people who have been harmed in that way respond to it in a thank you. What's the other option? Right? So like, the idea that like the Bible says you should give 10% of your income, not really there, but it's used to like manipulate people into giving you money and giving you 10% of their Social Security check when they can't even pay for, what they've got. And, to name that as corrupt and then people are like, okay, this is interesting. Now what? Or they'll send you a DM and say like, okay, yeah, I feel like I can trust that you won't bullshit me. Here's the next question. So I do that. I did that. And then I did like progressive takes on the Bible, I call it an ancient spiritual text instead of the Bible, just because people bump on the Bible word. But not just to like parrot Dan McClellan and Pete Enns, but in a way that says, okay, so, we don't have to deal with the Bible's sexual ethic and, map an ancient culture's understanding of sexuality one for one onto our modern culture.
Probably shouldn't.
Right.
Not just have to.
What?
Right?
But it was written right there.
Right. But what that does is it lets you look at like something deeper in those passages and find something and then say, okay, now that thing is something that I can say, how does that help me be the best version of myself? So the idea is that like, I try to take scholars and convey their content in a way that pushes people towards being able to form their own spiritual beliefs. And then I actually talk about how you choose beliefs instead of inheriting them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and there was all of these people that they were like, actually, this is really healing for me.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is an interesting question for me because the concept of choosing beliefs, at very least on some level, beliefs kind of aren't a choice, right? Like I can't choose to believe something like, if you just say, hey, I'll give you $100 if you just believe that there's a giant pickle in space.
For sure.
I can't. Like, if I'm being honest, I can't just choose that.
You choose beliefs based on the data that you've received.
I guess my perspective would be that I receive a bunch of data and then my brain shuffles it around as best it can. Okay. And then whatever comes out of that shuffle is what I believe, but right. I don't know that I chose that. It just feels like that's just my summation of everything that I've been able to take in.
Right. Yeah. So, I totally get that. And I don't think you're wrong. What I'm talking about is that like people often have given someone else authority, chosen to give Brother Johnny the like role of telling them what is true and what to believe. And they have just adopted that belief system. And so really they've chosen beliefs either way. But ultimately the choice to have it outsourced and just inherit beliefs from either some sort of external source is the thing that causes people to like unravel.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of research on this as well,
for sure.
Because there's a big difference between closely held beliefs about the way the world works and what cognitive scientists of religion might label religious credences.
Yeah, right.
Because when you say, "Oh, I believe that," do you believe that Jesus did that or the other to this or that or the other person or whatever? They're not. Whether or not that is actually a deeply held belief is kind of irrelevant. Mm-hmm. What is important is, are you willing to sign off on this?
Right.
And so are you willing to give your public assent, which is that turns that thing not so much into a belief as into a credence. It is a creed. Are you willing to sign off on the creed? Because we can't really have like we can, you've got a telescope over here. We can look into space. We can see things. We can observe things, and our intuitions and the more critical thinking that we use and the more analytical thinking that we use, the more convinced we might be of actual truth claims.
Right.
That's a different kind of cognition.
Right.
Than saying, I believe Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah.
Because that's
for sure.
You're really just saying this identity is so important to me that I'm willing to sign off on this credence. They function in different ways. They change in different ways because like when you have seen a ball drop, you don't just one day wake up and be like, gravity's not for me anymore.
Right.
Like, those things they're not revisable.
Yeah.
But within religions, or quasi-religious communities, one day you might say, we cannot elect a president who cheats on his wife because then he'll cheat on the country. And a few short decades later, you wake up and be like, suddenly I believe that we're not electing a pastor, we're electing a leader, and so I no longer believe that it is wrong to have a president who cheats on his wife. So those kinds of credences are revisable, and they are revised constantly.
Yeah.
And so I think they're also operating on different wavelengths there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where, so I think like rewinding to this original path that we were on, out of all of that, came this community of people that was looking for like a spiritual community, like a church. Most of them had experienced church, and in some way there was an element of that was positive for them. They were looking for that, but they could never go to a church. Right. Could never go back. That was not a thing. And
because Sister Pam is there.
Sister Pam is there, and all in like the place where the trauma happened, right? That is a trigger. It's and not just the one place, but all these places. And so they started asking for a place to gather, and we started Discord, and eventually it was sort of dubbed Not Church because it was like the stuff you wanted from church, where people were having spiritual conversations, talking about, God or whatever, and being there for each other in difficult times without somebody telling you you're going to hell because there was a tarot deck next to your, bed.
Just because I know that my 90-year-old mom is listening.
Okay.
Discord is an online, is an internet sort of meeting app.
Yeah, it's like somewhere between a forum and chat.
Yeah.
And then as part of that, we started this podcast called Unbelief, where on once a week I do like something like a Bible study where I do a longer form lecture that I pause and say like when Moses goes in hot to the Pharaoh and is like, right after everything is perfect, when he goes to the people and they're like, all right, yeah, great, God told you. And then he goes in hot with the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Like, why are you talking to me like that? And to like be able to extrapolate just human experience out of that. And like, I've definitely done that. Right. And like, that's not always the best. So that kind of like looking at trying to understand the original meaning and the original context, and then find points in that it can help me become a better version of myself. So that happens once a week. And then we interview somebody or like a scholar, somebody like that, author, or just have somebody tell their story of like everything unraveling and what works for them right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, it's this really weird, but beautiful community, right? Like, you have no idea the wide ranging discussions amongst this group. Like, somebody talking about tarot and astrology in this one channel, while talking about in another channel the like takeover of the Republican Party by the religious right, while in another channel really trying to understand this Greek thing that Dan McClellan said in his video that they linked in there, right? And it's like, and then a place where like somebody like at 11:30 at night says, I'm going to the hospital, I think I'm having a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
Right? And it's like, and nobody's yelling at each other. And when anybody says like, I've had this like spiritual experience, everybody's like, that's amazing. Tell me how you did. Like, they want to know more. Some of them want to try that. And like, honestly, being there for
is
like,
usually the answers.
Yeah. Psychedelics are helpful.
Right. Yeah. I was talking at this church about my book this last Sunday. And for whatever reason, I said, Moses went up on this mountain, took ayahuasca, and had this like, I won't be invited back.
I just stumbled on a bush. It was already on fire. And I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And this dude started talking to me from out of the fire. Are you the singing bush? He said.
Right. Something like that.
Well, and there's that's a question I get all the time about psychedelics and other kinds of drug use in ancient Israel. But we have discovered on one of the incense altars that was discovered in a Judahite temple that dates to the first temple period. They had 3 different types of cannabis had been burned on the incense altar. So there was cannabis in ancient Israelite and Judahite temple ritual.
Yeah. Just don't say that on my TikTok live because it'll immediately get taken down.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to have grown-up conversations on TikTok.
Yeah. There's a knock at the door. And
like, what happened? Oh, yeah, somebody said marijuana.
Yeah. So how has this experience been for you? As you say, it can get very intense in these forums, and it can be a lot. You know, if people are coming to you first when they're on their way to the hospital.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, it's not. So this, first off, the scale of it, especially on TikTok, DMs, and that kind of stuff, the scale there is sort of off the charts. It's hard. It's something that I'm still trying to grapple with. Showing up as a pastor in that space, with this, like the scale of all of that. But in the like Discord community, which is really sort of the size of a church, it's not uncommon. It's not that far off from what I would have experienced as a pastor, except, there's, in a mega church in the Deep South, there was a lot less conversation about tarot and astrology.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and in the Discord context, they're able to offload a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the guidance. It's not all on you. It's They take care of a lot of that themselves.
Yeah.
Which is what you mentioned earlier. We were talking about how a community develops, and suddenly there are people who are jumping into the comments and being like, "Well, Jeremy would say this," and
and it was funny. Like when that first started happening, I was like, I mean, they're right, but this is weird.
Yeah. How dare you? But then you're like, can you take care of this?
Can I hire you?
It's probably not great for you to speak for me, but if you're going to, that was actually a really good way to do it.
Well, I had somebody recommend to me recently, because I don't even see all the DMs I get, much less read, much less respond to them, and somebody was like, "Well, you can train a language model with your own stuff, and then create like an app where they can come and ask for advice, and it will pretty reliably respond with your voice and everything to say what it thinks you might say." And I was like, "Ooh, that was like I imagine there are certain kind of industries and professions, where that's just that changes the game, but.
You're not ready for McClellan app?
with as much trouble as we have found just with like Chat GPT and
Dan GPT. There we go.
I don't
branding
know
is just sitting there.
It's just hanging right out there for us.
And I think that's the really, and I really don't know what to do. Well, I have a quarter of your followers, and I still, there's thousands of comments. Like I get so many. It's like at some point I've just stopped trying to respond to all the comments.
Well, you also position yourself as pastoral in your engagement, and I have studiously avoided doing that. So I imagine that you get a much higher proportion of your messages from people looking for help, because I've been like, I'm not here to be your pastor,
and I just give unwanted advice.
Right?
So
no, for sure.
I definitely don't. Yeah,
and this morning I was trying. I mean, like it's never ending DMs. I can never get to the end of them, so I just do my best. And I had a mom whose kid came out to her, and her family is rejecting the kid and like saying like how, like on religious grounds, and like how do I process? Is there any way to like work with them, and like there's just like that to help them understand something else about God. And I that's almost every DM that's not just some bot account with like a half naked woman saying, "Hey," right?
How you doing?
I'm like, delete.
Barking up the wrong tree.
Right. Yeah.
In so many ways.
Right. So we, but they're all like this, like sort of intense thing. And like you said, like I've tried to position myself as that. And
Can you give us, do you have what is your response to that?
It depends specifically. The specifics are really important. So the first thing is their instinct is to protect their kid. So the Trevor Project, I'm a huge fan of the Trevor Project. I'm actually splitting the royalties of my book with the Trevor Project because they save kids' lives every day. They offer free crisis counseling to LGBTQ young people.
Right.
And they did this research, and when a kid comes out, it's 15% chance that they'll try to kill themselves. If they're rejected on religious grounds by their family, that doubles. And so I always say, like, your instinct to protect your kid is the right one, right? This is real. This is the research. Like, that's important. And so there's sort of like two ways. One of the things that I say is like, you're not going to change anyone's mind in one conversation. And if these are people that are like consistently part of your life, it's not something you have to do. So really try to think of changing their mind in 1,000 conversations instead of one. So very small things. We don't have to have the whole deal, but start on the like smallest, most periphery thing and make a little comment and have a short, non-confrontational discussion and continue to work through that. I often recommend a book called Holy Love by a guy named Steve Harper. He was an evangelical seminary professor who was like was not affirming, sort of changed his mind, wrote this book, but he speaks evangelical-ish in the book, and it's super short. And so I always recommend people to like read that as a way to like, this is how you can talk to people. Then the other thing is I say like to invite the family members to notice the good things in their kid.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I get that you think that they're going to hell. I get that you, whatever it is, but I just want you to tell me a couple of things that you think are great about them. Right. And I want you to tell them whenever you see them something that is really good about them, because whatever you believe, you've got to know this is hard for them.
Yeah.
And they need people who love them to tell them good things about themselves. And so that's something I got from a psychology friend, because it's this shifting in perspective towards, I'm going to focus on the positive in them and on noticing that. And so those are the sort of two paths I invite people to go down with that.
It's not unlike what you said about how you felt about yourself.
Right.
Which was like, okay, well, this is like, even in that construct, which, I reject the construct that homosexuality is evil, but even within that construct, there's still room, at least in the Christian tradition, to say, I'm going to love this person and just see this thing as a sin that they're dealing with, or a sin but that's on them. That's their thing. So I think the idea of inviting someone to remind themselves of the things that they love about the person, and inviting them to remember their own sense of kindness, and wanting and their own sense of wanting to embrace and love people.
Right. And people know their family members better than I do.
Yeah.
And some of them have actually shared that like statistic with them and said, look, you can believe what you want to believe, but if you tell them this, it's twice as likely they're going to want to kill themselves. And I know that you don't want to be responsible for that. Right. So why don't we set the bar at only sharing beliefs that don't make them want to kill themselves? Right. It's a low bar, but it
seems so great.
I feel like we can clear it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Now you've mentioned your book, and you've talked a little bit about it earlier. What can you tell us about the book?
Yeah.
It's called,
because you're at the tail end of a book promotional tour.
Our book tours are interweaving, right? I'm ending as you're beginning.
We're going to have a rumble. We're going to have a book rumble at some point. We're going to meet up in Portland.
That's right. The book is called How to Not Suck as a Christian. I know it's a split infinitive. It's a how-to book.
I think it's okay to split infinitives.
Right. I agree.
We don't believe in dogma about language either, so I think it's okay.
Except for the Oxford comma.
Prescriptivism is right out.
That's right.
The official position of the Data Over Dogma podcast, apart from the necessity of the Oxford comma, is descriptivism.
Not even necessity, just the obvious utility.
The obvious correctness.
So the book grew out of this community, and somebody said, you should write a book that like helps Christian not suck. And so I tossed it back and I said, what if we write this book? What would the chapters be? And so I got like 100 chapter. And it was really interesting to me because, I mean, some of the comments were snarky for sure, but a lot of the comments were authentically out of these people's pain, right? And really would like Christians to not do this. And so, it says, like, one of the chapters is respect atheists. They're doing fine. Right. Stop the homophobia. Racist leaders have to go. Stop making kids sign purity pledges. Take the Bible seriously, not literally.
That's a good one.
I actually have a rainbow sticker of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a yellow cover with big black letters, How to Not Suck as a Christian. And it's, I did this thing because I'm petty, and I don't apologize for that. we did this thing when I was offering the signed copies where they could pay like $5 more. I'd send them a second copy of the paperback if they agreed to leave it in a place in a church that needed it and take a picture and tag me in it. So that's been, I love that's been a fun marketing. I mean, it's great.
I'm guessing that some of our listeners might want to do that. I'm guessing you might get a few of those.
Yeah.
What I hear a lot from people about my forthcoming book is they say they're gonna give it to family for Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving for Christmas, or leave it under the mats of people they know, right? Like in their community. And I imagine you get even
like
more
St.
of that
Nicholas sticking it in the shoes while they're
yes, exactly. There you go.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a coworker that was really excited about the book and bought it, took a picture holding it with me, sent it to their parent who, in her words, sucked as a Christian. And they're not straight. They're part of the LGBTQ community. Their parents have been questionable with that. And it was interesting when they sent it, their parents said, "I think I might need to read that book." And so she was telling that story in the office, and another person in the office right afterwards bought a book for her parent and gave it to her to mail. And they've actually read it, which I love that.
That's got to be hugely gratifying.
Yeah, I love it. It's the foreword was written by a friend of mine named Brian McLaren, and his writing has changed my life 1,000 times over. So to have him say nice things about my writing, just I got it and I was like weeping. But one of the things is like if you're reading this book, or it's something like if you're reading this book, then you might actually have the ability to change your thinking or your actions. And and congratulations for like making that. Like it's an unusual skill in the modern world or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Well, where can people get the book?
Oh, everywhere. Audible, Amazon, hopefully bookshop.org. Wherever you go there, it works like Amazon, except you select a local bookstore and they get the profits instead of the big multinational corporation.
Did you do the narration of the audiobook?
I did. It was super fun. I'd never done that before. Yeah. And the whole process was really fun. Yeah.
I just sent in pickups today for my audiobook, and it was so funny because after like making recording audio and video in my career, they were kind of like, "You're probably going to be old hat at this." I was like, "I guarantee you, I know nothing about this." Right. Like Dan will tell you, I am an idiot when it comes to most of this stuff, just like he tells me. But it went so smoothly, and it was funny. The director was like, "I don't have to interrupt you near as much as normal," and I had like 6 or 7 lines for pickups. They were like, "This isn't a lot, so why don't you we don't even to involve the director. You can just take care of it yourself."
Yeah, I had the same experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is weird because I don't read the same way as I talk in general.
Well, yeah. And I had an experience recording something 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article for an LDS journal, and they were like, "We like to provide an audio version, and our audience likes it to be the person who wrote the article. So can you record this?" And it took me an entire afternoon to do just a little article, and I hated every second of it.
For sure.
I was kind of nervous about this, but on the other side of several years of speaking into a microphone for a living, I guess I kind of developed some remedial competence at doing this, which Dan is, I'm sure, surprised to hear and maybe a little incredulous, but
not at all.
I was sure to speak right into the microphone the entire time too.
Congratulations, that's great.
I can be taught.
Okay, so the book. Where else can people find you? How do they track you down on the apps and the whatnot?
Sure, I'm skeptic.pastor at Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. The podcast is called Unbelief, and you just search Unbelief. There's not other podcasts that come up, and then the Not Church community. So it's a spiritual community, but we all have all kinds of trauma around people asking us for a percentage of our income. So we don't do that. It's pay for what you get. And so it's $3 a month. It's Patreon. And we just say like, look, it's $3 a month. If it doesn't work for you, just stop paying and you're done.
Yeah.
And so that's patreon.com/skepticpastor. So wait, patreon.com/skepticpastor.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sure we'll have some people go and check it out. Yeah. Jeremy Steele, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm a big fan of the podcast. Really.
Thank you. If you people at home are a big fan of the podcast, you can become one of our patrons while you're, since you're over there, check it out. The Skeptic Pastor thing, you can come over to patreon.com/Data Over Dogma and join up as a patron of ours. That would be great. You can get early access and ad-free access to every episode, as well as we do. Are you going to join us for the after party?
Yeah, absolutely.
we do an after party.
Yeah.
There's bonus material, bonus content every single week.
I'm
over
told
there.
that there's scotch at the after party.
There is scotch at the after party.
One of our episodes types is called Drinks and Deconstruction. So
yes, I love it. There hasn't been, but now today there is. So yeah, absolutely. And also, if you would like to reach us, it's contact@dataoverdogmapod.com. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Data Over Dogma is a member of the Airwave Media Network. It is a production of Data Over Dogma Media, LLC, copyright 2025, all rights reserved.
As a longtime foreign correspondent, I've worked in lots of places, but nowhere as important to the world as China. I'm Jane Perlez, former Beijing bureau chief for the New York Times. On Face Off, the US versus China, we'll explore what's critical to this important global relationship. Trump and Xi Jinping, AI, TikTok, and even Hollywood. New episodes of Face Off are available now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you ever wondered what the science says about certain foods, products, or treatments? Does chiropractic actually work? Should I only buy organic foods? Are GMOs actually harmful? Is adrenal fatigue real?
We've got you covered. The goal of the Unbiased Science podcast is to dispel misinformation and misconceptions across an array of science and public health topics. We love to debunk myths and help arm our listeners with information so they can make evidence-based decisions. Make sure to tune in to the Unbiased Science podcast to get all of your questions answered.
Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Then the Sleep Cove podcast can help you. Hi, I'm Christopher Fitton, the voice and clinical hypnotherapist behind Sleep Cove. Sleep Cove features sleep hypnosis, meditations, and bedtime stories, all designed to help those of you who struggle at night to achieve a restful and peaceful night's sleep. Search for Sleep Cove on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and see why Sleep Cove helps millions of people sleep deeply all night long.